Socialism is a political ideology that came into existence as the Industrial Revolution spread across Europe. Its founding fathers, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, saw the horrific conditions many factory workers faced during this period and tried to create a new ideology that would put workers first, unlike capitalism, which they saw as being beneficial for a few rich factory owners rather than the majority of the population. As such, the pair moulded the ideology to stand opposed to capitalism and everything they saw it produce. Capitalism is an ideology driven by self-interest, where people should want to work more and earn more if they deem it to be in their self-interest to do so. This leads to competition blooming in a capitalist society. Different businesses will try to compete against one another to come out on top. This is because it's in the business's self-interest to be the market leader, as it will lead to more customers and profit. This competition has a number of byproducts. For instance, it often leads to innovation, such as in the smartphone market, where competition between brands like Apple and Samsung has led to new developments. However, another effect of capitalism is inequality, as in a society driven by self-interest, where people are competing against one another, someone will come out on top and another below them, and so on until you reach the bottom, and the majority of the population lie closer to the bottom than the top. Socialism rejects much of capitalism, favouring a society centred around cooperation, equality, and collectivism. As such, there are a number of key principles that underpin socialist ideas that are important to know. Socialists believe in a collectivist society where humans work together to meet the needs of all, rather than working competitively to meet the needs of a few. To quote Marx, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. They believe that a collectivist society would create better conditions for all, as the society would work together for common goals, which socialists believe would create unity and belonging, rather than working for the elite. Socialists also believe collectivism to be less wasteful, as everyone would be working in the common interest, unlike in a capitalist system, where multiple people may be working in the same role at different companies, where one would be needed in a collectivist system. Collectivism works through state intervention and centrally planning the economy, thus increasing the size of the state. It involves services that are usually provided by the private sector in a capitalist society being provided by the government, such as housing. However, whilst all socialists agree to collectivism in some extent, there are differences. Marxists believe that the means of productions, such as factories, should be owned by the state with no private ownership, whereas revisionist socialists and third-way socialists, which are both more modern developments in the ideology, prefer a mix of private and public ownership. However, collectivism does have its critics. It's often seen as a vague notion of what a society should be, and has been treated with skepticism since the 1970s, and outright doubt since the collapse of the USSR. Many liberals especially point to the need for a large, potentially tyrannical state, which downplays individuality, as a key issue with collectivist arguments. Socialists believe in common humanity. This is the idea that humans are naturally inclined to cooperate, sharing interests and working together. However, some socialists believe this has been partially eroded due to the competitive nature of capitalism. This is due to a socialist belief that the society has an impact on human character. In a socialist opinion, if you take away the broken society, in this case capitalism, and replace it with a socialist one, common humanity will play a greater role. Some socialists believe that common humanity drives workers to desire socialist policies, as they lead to the improvement of society, which they believe humans will naturally prefer to personal gain. However, it's important to remember that this is the view of hardcore Marxist socialists, and has been contested by revisionist and neo-revisionist socialists, who believe that material reward is needed to motivate people, whilst keeping morality in mind. Equality is fundamental to socialism as an ideology, as all branches desire greater levels of equality. Many socialists, especially Marxists, believe that inequality is a product of capitalism and not innate human differences, such as natural ability. However, different branches of socialism are divided on what equality should look like. As socialists often see relative poverty as just as damaging as absolute poverty, many socialists, especially Marxists, seek complete equality of outcome. However, recently, equality of opportunity has been a more prevalent strand of thought in socialism. For example, the new Labour government pushed for policies increasing equality of opportunity, but paid less attention to equality of outcome. However, Certain Marxists would argue that capitalism and class plays a much greater role in determining wealth than human differences, and thus believe that only equality of opportunity isn't sufficient. The division on equality is incredibly important in socialism. As we have established, Marxist socialists favour a system of absolute equality, where everyone has the same material outcome, whereas social democrats and third-way socialists favour increasing relative equality, which involves narrowing the wealth gap to increase but not remove inequality. Both conservatives and liberals have their criticisms of this approach to equality. Conservatives view material inequality as a way to encourage hard work and success. They also believe that society is naturally hierarchical and this should be conserved. On the other hand, classical liberals believe that this approach to complete equality damages meritocratic principles and harms individuality. Both groups are generally opposed to bigger states needed to implement systems of equality, as they view it as a threat to liberty and leading to lazy populations. Social class is important to socialists as they deem it to be the primary dividing factor between people. This is due to socialists believing that class and class conflict has been the deciding factor in most of human history. Class is primarily seen through an economic lens, and while socialists believe something should be done about class divides, they are internally divided. Debates on class have become more prevalent with an increasing middle class in many advanced countries such as the UK, which has led to a decrease in the number of working class communities. Marxists believe that the world is dominated by two classes, where the bourgeoisie rule over the proletariat. This leads to class conflict. However, other socialists take a more nuanced approach with social classes, including more of them. This is important for those that wish to decrease the differences between these classes. We can see this in modern politics, as in many advanced economies the importance of class has declined alongside industrial jobs. In the UK, the modern Labour Party sees class as much more subtle and nuanced than bosses versus workers, and thus they've changed their policies to reflect this. Socialists are generally supportive of the idea of common ownership, as they believe that private ownership has a negative effect on society as a whole. However, they are divided on what this would look like. In the past, it may have included returning land to common ownership from the feudal nobility. However, today it is usually used in reference to the nationalisation of key industries such as British Rail. Marx believed in greater worker control, allowing them to keep the products of their labour, as he felt capitalism had separated workers from the products of their labour and thus advocated for worker control in factories. In modern times, this idea has become more complicated, with the erosion of factories as the main working area for the majority of the population in developed countries, as well as the rise of management roles and workers owning shares in the business that they work for. Hi all, thanks for watching the first video in the Socialism series. I hope you enjoyed and I would appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. My next revision video will return to electoral systems. However, the next video in the Socialism series will focus on revolutionary socialism and Karl Marx.